Ladies, no? Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats so we can get started. May I ask you to get settled so that we can have a meaningful conversation and not be under time pressures. And to our esteemed speakers, please find your name and take your seats, please. I knew you'd be the last one here, Daniel. Get on stage, quickly. Here you are. Everybody settled? You've got 1 minute to change your seat if you don't like the person next to you. That's my cue. Cell phone on silent or off for the duration of our conversation for the next hour and 15 minutes. Thank you. My name is Redi Tlhabi. I'm a South African journalist, a broadcaster, and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. I often share my background because I think it reflects the beauty of dialogue, that a person from the southern tip of Africa can be in conversation with speakers and an audience from the global north. But in the context of today's discussion, my background as a South African is very central to our conversation today. I grew up in Soweto as a child in the dying days of apartheid in South Africa. I saw very much the force and the power, the militarism of the apartheid defense force patrolling our streets, spitting at our parents as children, stopping them randomly, asking for identity documents. I also saw the difference between the white children in the suburbs and us in the township, the education outcomes, the health outcomes. So I know all of that. But I'm also privileged because it was indeed towards the last few years of apartheid. And unlike my parents, who grew up in apartheid and never voted until 1994. In fact, my father died at age 50 without having voted in the country of his birth, South Africa. So I count amongst the lucky South Africans because I saw the deliberate choices that our leaders like Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, and all the anti-apartheid activists, black and white, I saw them making a choice between war and reconciliation, between war and reconstruction. And because they chose the latter, peace, reconstruction, dialogue, that's why I'm standing here today. Whatever you read about my country, inequality, economic hardships, crime, it is all true. But South Africa's story is truly the story of what it chose in 1992, in 1990 when Nelson Mandela walked out of prison. That's our story. There's a place under the sun for all of us, black and white, Muslim, Jews, Christian, all of us, in this messy contestation, the dialogue, the political differences. The pillar of South Africa as a state is democracy, is living with difference. It is building bridges and traveling towards the other side. So it is with that spirit that I start this conversation today and introduce you to my esteemed panelists. I will start in no order of importance, just as you appear on my list. I want to introduce you to Nour, Odeh, Palestinian political analyst, a journalist, and an activist. Welcome. So let's do this. Let me introduce them all and then you clap for them because there's going to be a hierarchy here. I'm going to pick up who you clapped for the most and you're going to be in trouble afterwards. So let's do the applause afterwards. Manal Radwan, Counsellor, Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia. We have Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. You have Christophe, Bigot, EU Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process, and of course, Daniel Levy, President, US Middle East Project, United States. Welcome. I think I'll break with protocol and start with you, DG Lazzarini. because of the magnitude of the political moment, because we're waking up every day to more bloodshed, displacement, hunger. Take us to the streets of Gaza. What is your staff saying? What are they reporting on the ground? What are the obstacles that they're facing on a daily basis?
Thank you, Redi. Sometimes we have the belief, I have the feeling that we have said almost everything about Gaza, and we are also out of words to try to describe the level of suffering people are going through. When I talk to my staff, they are saying, you know, we are neither alive, we are neither nor dead. We are just walking corpse right now. That's the way we function. When we meet each other, we say, I wish I will be able to the real hell, because in the real hell, we might find food and we don't have to struggle to find food for our children who are dying silently. So that's the kind of reality feeling you will meet in Gaza. Our staff, we have 12,000 staff, they are caregivers. They are sharing the same fate than anyone else in Gaza. They have lost their house, they have lost relatives, they have lost children, members of the family have been injured, they have been forced to displacement over the last 20 months, more than 15, 20 times. Most of them are living in a military zone. All of them know that there is absolutely no safe place in Gaza. Wherever you go, you can be killed. Whether you are in a hospital, health center, UN shelter, in a so-called declared safe zone by the Israeli government, wherever you are, you can be killed at any moment. And now, there is a new word to describe Gaza, which is famine. A completely man-made, fabricated, constructed, deliberate famine. It's a context where food assistance, life-saving assistance has been weaponized. All the warning of the last few months about deepening hunger, starvation spreading, which will lead to famine, have fallen in deaf ears. And it became a reality 2 weeks ago when the world nutritional expert came to the conclusion that the threshold of a famine is now met in Gaza City and in the northern governorate, meaning 500,000 people living in this situation, meaning also that without or in the absence of a substantial response, this will spread to the south of the Gaza Strip and impact everyone there. And this is not the famine of Somalia. This is not the famine where you have a combination of climate change, war-torn country, collapse of all the institutions, which is much more difficult to address. This is a situation where political will, political decision can address it. This is a situation where unfolding under our watch on a daily basis. Now, how come we ended up like this? Now, if I look at through the lens of the agency I am leading, UNRWA, which is, as you say, Redi, the agency supporting, providing human development services to Palestinian refugees, and the bulk of the population in Gaza are Palestinian refugees. The government of Israel has declared that they want to dismantle this agency, to get rid of UNRWA and to be replaced by something else. For this, they have adopted legislative bills. One of them prohibiting any official contact between Israeli official and UNRWA official. As a consequence, I have no international staff anymore on the ground, but I have 12,000 staff in Gaza, committed, dedicated, despite all the risk they are taking on a daily basis, and also 4,000 staff in the West Bank, providing school and health center activities. Weakening the backbone of the humanitarian response deliberately as a political intent has contributed to the situation of famine that we are now witnessing. Now, Redi, the most shocking is the extraordinary inaction, indifference. What we observe in Gaza is a total lack, first, of true compassion, and secondly, because of the lack of true compassion, there is a total, I would say, environment of impunity prevailing. Okay. And this combination render us, when I say us, our member states, complicit by indifference, complicit by inaction of atrocities no one will ever be able to say we did not know, because it's unfolding under our watch.
Okay. Let's bring in the EU here. It feels, or it sounds as if some lines have been crossed here. You are the EU Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process, Christophe Bigot. I listened yesterday to the deliberations at the opening plenary, and there was a lot of emphasis around the EU being the largest donor of Palestinians, and so that is emblematic of some action. But donors without political courage, I would contend, often perpetuate the status quo. Is the EU merely a payer and not a player and not an agent of the kind of political action and leadership that we are also desperate to see in that region?
Well, this is a relevant question. I think Kaya Kallas, I don't know if you heard her yesterday, try to answer that. Yes, we are definitely a player, and this should not be underestimated. I think rightly, Kaya Kallas said yesterday that we should also put our money where our mouth is. And I'm sorry to say that I think it's a bit awkward that the EU and its members are not only the major donor, maybe half of the money, for example, given to UNRWA, we discussed this morning with Philippe, is given by EU and its members. So where is the solidarity of the world towards the Palestinians? If I take the example of the Palestinian Authority, we are providing to the Palestinian Authority 1.6 billion euros. So these are not just words, if I may. And when I discussed with the Prime Minister of Palestine, it is very, very important. As you may know, the Palestinian Authority is on the verge of collapsing financially. For several reasons. One of the reasons is that Israel is withholding the tax revenues. And here also is not only about payment, it's also about demarching. Times and again, I've done this, Kallas has done this, and at other levels, it was done also with the Israelis, so they release these funds. So the payment is not just to be put aside. If we talk about humanitarian fund to Gaza, 1.5 billion euros were given by EU and their members for the last 3 years. And when I talk with UNICEF, with WFP, they don't put this aside, you know. We are talking about practical, concrete questions. So we also try to have some leverage on the decision taken by Israel. I have to admit that we have been unsuccessful most of the time. But who has been successful, if I may? Some don't want to be successful, and some are not successful. We tried our best. It's true that, of course, if I may, sorry, Daniel, that if we had the support of the United States on the measures we are asking, is to stop the settlement activity, to stop this E1 project, which we know will in some way put an end to the concept of two-state solution. If we got the support of the US about the two-state solution, we are going to have with Manal Radwan this Global Alliance event, a ministerial event in Nour, which will be about preserving a two-state solution, where if we had the US support, that will be a tremendous change. I would just stop there. We also try to get from Israel some measures regarding the humanitarian situation, regarding the access to Gaza. These measures were the ones asked by UN agencies. So it's only about access. So yes, it's only about trucks entering Gaza. It's only about having a north crossing point, having routes coming from Jordan, Egypt, and Cyprus being open. It's about fuel being provided. This is not enough. That's obvious. This is absolutely obvious. And when there is this catastrophic situation in Gaza, this is just, good dough, as we say in French. But this is nevertheless meaningful. Mm-hmm. Just provides a few examples of what we try to do. We are working also with our Arab friends about the day after. It looks awkward, maybe it looks out of reality, but we have to work on the day after. We have to think about how Gaza will look like after ceasefire. There is the reconstruction, financing here, once again paying, but it's also about the security. It's also about the governance. It is so important to use the day after to re-establish the unity of the Palestinian movement and authority, because the division has been used to avoid any meaningful negotiations. And it's so important to allow Palestinian Authority to be a player and to be an actor in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Well, just to give a few examples.
Sure,
sorry, being a little long.
That's just been made even more difficult. I'm sure you saw in the last couple of days that the Palestinian Authority, they have not been, or their visas have been revoked, can't attend UNGA in a couple of weeks. So this kind of isolation and privileging of different voices is complicating things. I want to bring in Saudi Arabia here. We've heard the leadership of Saudi Arabia talking about normalization of relations with Israel, that the recognition of the Palestinian state is a precondition to that. But at other times, it feels as if Saudi Arabia is not using its political and economic muscle as leverage, that you sometimes hold irreconcilable positions, whereas you're talking about recognition of Palestinian statehood, but there are these emerging new relationships that are coming with the United States. Donald Trump received a very warm reception in Riyadh. I'm not suggesting that he should have been booed. No, I'm not. But the United States is a central player in what happens in the Middle East. So I guess my question is, are you using your political and economic leverage enough to push for recognition of Palestinian statehood, or have you privileged your pragmatic diplomacy, economic pursuits above this question of Palestinian statehood?
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here. It's a great privilege to be here amongst you, and I also want to pay much respect to the Slovenian government for their very principled position and for leading with other European countries on recognition, which I would dare to connect to your question and say that without the leadership of Saudi Arabia, and I think my Slovenian colleagues and other European colleagues would attest to, taking this to the forefront, it would have been difficult to materialize and to sustain. I think in Saudi Arabia, we are not about undermining our principled positions or talking one way and acting another, but rather we have been put at the forefront of in somehow trying to defend against this perception of normalization, which is absolutely a myth, and I have heard it over and over again. And I'm not surprised that this is the first question that you ask of me, because the other side has been very keen in wanting to popularize this myth and this false narrative. It only legitimates them, and for them, if Saudi Arabia is thinking about normalization and not using its political and economic leverage, then maybe other countries should not take major steps forward. So I would warn you against that, and I would advise you to listen to Saudi Arabia and to listen to our leadership and to listen to, now it would be hundreds if not thousands of statements, but we really don't want to get into this battle of words, and let's look at the action that Saudi Arabia has been leading in a very steadfast fashion, and mind you that it has been done also in a very difficult environment, and we have not been shy to actually use our very strategic relationship with the United States to the benefit of the Palestinian and to the benefit of supporting the Palestinian Authority, and for saying in no unequivocal way that nothing will happen in the Middle East without the Palestinians getting their rights. And their rights is not about getting better living conditions or better economic conditions, but their right to self-determination and the right to a state of their own. If we had privileged or prioritized our economic interest with the United States or with others as well, you would have seen normalization take place a long time ago, during the first Trump administration, during the Biden administration, or even when Trump came back to office. But you haven't seen that. You have seen the opposite. We still think, and I think many, if not all, agree that the US is indispensable to any peace effort in the Middle East. And so it would be a fool not to use our leverage with the United States to bring them to the realization that we need to look at the grassroots of the problem. This is not about only securing the end of the ceasefire or the end of the war, but we are actually taking it 100 steps above that into ending the conflict altogether. This is the problem. The problem did not start with October 7th, dare I say that. The problem started with the occupation and with the persistent occupation. Now the problem is even taken to the next level, because with the inaction of not only the US, but of many of us, we are all complicit in this. I have to accept what Mr. Lazzarini has just put forward. We are all complicit in this, and we need to do better. The problem now is that we have an Israeli government that thinks that it can liquidate the Palestinian cause altogether. Not only that, but on top of it, that it can become the hegemon in our region, that it can go in and out of Syria as it wishes, it can redraw borders with Lebanon, it can attack Yemen, it can attack anywhere. And it takes the whole region as a hostage to its whims and its understanding of security. Now, where we come in this interjunction is to say that every day Israel takes these aggressive, illegal action, it is becoming more and more insecure, and it is moving further and further away from being integrated in the region. We not only need a Palestinian state, but we need also a state that respects international law, respects its neighbors, and understands that you cannot, by force, achieve your security or achieve your place in the world.
I just want to ask you a follow-up question very, very quickly. You are an interlocutor with the United States. You've said quite clearly that it would not be wise or prudent to not use your relationship with the United States to further cement the priority of the Palestinian cause. I know you're not a spokesperson for the US, but looking at the US from the outside, it is quite exasperating to understand its pathway on this matter. I'm referring to the latest reports that the former Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair, and Donald Trump's son-in-law were at the White House talking about the future of Palestine. I mean, the mind just boggles. Here you are as Saudi Arabia, here you are as the EU, you've got other players, Qatar, and so on. But two individuals just come and they negotiate with the President of the United States. As a role player in the way that you've described, how does that impact your suggested solutions and your engagement with the United States? What do you say to them when you see them also pursuing other paths that seem to just be exacerbating the crisis?
Well, we make our position very clear publicly and privately. Saudi Arabia has principles in any resolution to the Palestinian conflict that is very clear. It has to rest on the realization of the Palestinian state. Anything short of realization of the Palestinian state is not going to be acceptable to Saudi Arabia. And I think that is important, and that carries its weight forward. And we are privileged and honored to be advancing this position. I have heard my dear friend Christophe talk about the day after. I think it's the day after is a term that can be coined in any whichever way. What we are talking about is we are talking about a period where Gaza has been completely destroyed. The West Bank is under immense existential threat, and we need to stop and to put an immediate stop to that. And what we need is to empower the Palestinian Authority to deliver the Palestinian state. So whatever period of time we have in space and time, through an international coalition led by the United States, that is very much welcomed, the European Union and other European countries, the Arab countries at the forefront. We have the Egyptian Arab OIC plan. We are ready to work even closer with the European Union to develop practical ideas, also with the United States. And the objective is very clear: to empower the Palestinian Authority to deliver a Palestinian state within certain parameters and within a certain timeline. This day after cannot be about occupation by extension. So what Israel could not do by war, that it wants to get the others, including Arab countries and including the US and including European countries, to actually pay the bill for and to extend this occupation and to completely prevent a Palestinian state from being realized. That is not acceptable for us, and I have to also say that I completely respect the steadfastness that the Palestinian Authority have shown. They are being cornered in every which way possible, and their arms are being twisted, including by denying them their money, including by trying to bankrupt them, including by trying to destroy the government of Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa, who has gained tremendous respect worldwide in working under extreme severe conditions, but delivering on very difficult reforms that any European country. I've heard it from a European foreign minister, I wouldn't say which one. I said, what you have done in a few months, we could not do in years. And under these really tremendous circumstances, they are still delivering, and they still want to service their people. We need to empower them. We need to help them. We need to be there with them, and that is what Saudi Arabia is doing, not only Saudi Arabia alone, but through its other partnership with Arab and Muslim countries, and through also its partnership with the European countries, and also through trying to impress on the United States that there is a solution to this. There is a solution to resolve the whole conflict altogether. This myth that we can live with the Arab-Israeli conflict or the Palestinian conflict for decades to come, and maybe somewhere our generations will liberate Palestine, is a big problem that is complicating everything and aiding to the extension of the occupation. We have to think in practical terms, and we have to believe that the liberation of Palestine is possible, and we have to work on that liberation right now.
Okay, Nour, let me bring you in here. Everybody agrees here. Let's go home. It's done. Everybody agrees that the situation is intolerable, that the humanitarian crisis is a stain on humanity's conscience, that the leadership failures have been visible. I'm just curious to know, with all of this being said, how is it being received on the ground? And I'm uncomfortable asking that question because I know that people don't know where their meal is going to come from. Children are dying of preventable diseases. Yes. We have heard and seen that there have been assassinations of aid workers, point blank range. I don't like violence. I don't even think I'm saying it properly. But aid workers being shot, journalists, over 200 being killed. So when you hear all of this, I'm curious to know, on the ground in Palestine, do people believe that the world is coalescing around a solution? Do they trust the messages? Would they trust what they are hearing today? But in answering that, I also want you to touch on what Manal Radwan also spoke to from my first question of this myth, the narratives themselves that are coming out of this crisis, the narratives of occupation, democracy, and resistance. How do these shape Palestinian expectations today?
Look, I want to say...
That's for me.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yes. And then I'm coming to Daniel.
Don't worry. So let me start by taking a look back, if I could. When this genocidal war started, we were in a position of, as Palestinians, of watching our world fall apart, minute by minute, of watching our loved ones killed, of everything we knew taken apart. And then being shocked by the fact that calling for a ceasefire was controversial, right? So for months, we had to beg and convince world leaders, especially in the West, that calling for a ceasefire was the right thing, the needed thing to do, right? It was controversial. And then when the world, and the Western world rather, moved past that supposed controversy of calling for an end to the slaughter, they started saying some of the right things, but still doing all the wrong things. And we seem to be stuck right now in a place where countries say the right thing, but are still not doing what they should be doing, which is to stop the genocide, to sanction a pariah state committing genocide, whose prime minister is wanted on an arrest warrant, international arrest warrant. Any other country committing all these atrocities live on the air, they're not up for debate. They're not a mystery. They're well documented. Palestine is the most documented place on earth. We are meticulously studied by everybody in the world. Every aspect of our life is documented. Every opinion we have is taken down. Everything we do is observed and analyzed by the world. Every opinion we have, even in times of grief, is judged by the world. So there are no mysteries here about what is happening. There are no mysteries about what needs to be done. So right now we are in a place where countries are saying the right thing. They're taking important steps because of the help and the leadership of countries like Saudi Arabia of recognizing Palestine. But I want to caution about how Palestinians are perceiving this, because there is a risk of tokenizing this recognition, of making it insignificant, of making it not count. Because let me tell you, as far as Palestinians are concerned, recognition is a debt. It's not a present. It's a debt that is almost 80 years too late. And it does not compensate, it does not replace, it cannot and it must not replace the need to end the genocide. So if recognition is going to mean that countries will not allow Israel to do business as usual, they will not allow settlement products to enter their territory and their economy, they will not receive settler leaders, they will not do business with settler leaders, they will question and perhaps bring to account their dual nationals who are serving in the Israeli army and committing atrocities, who are investing in illegal settlements and committing war crimes, then by all means, those recognitions will be welcome. But at this moment, as far as Palestinians are concerned, the priority is survival. And on that, no, the world is failing. The world doesn't see Palestinians. The world talks about recognition as if it's a present given to the Palestinians for being good boys and girls, for committing to Israeli security at a time when they're being annihilated, for committing to be a demilitarized state when and if Israel allows that state, while they're being exterminated. For saying thank you for the money that is being given to the government while our money, our taxpayer money, is being robbed and nobody's doing anything about it. In fact, some of those studies, and I'll conclude with that so I don't take up too much time, a lot of the studies that have been done on Palestinian economy say, without a doubt, that if Israeli occupation ended today, Palestinians would need zero assistance. So this is not about money. Palestinians are not beggars. We don't want handouts. We don't want the world to keep giving us money. In fact, I would dare say most Palestinians don't want any money. They want to be free. They want to be seen as equal in their humanity to others. They want to see the world value the survival of the Palestinian people on its own merits and not because it serves Israel and not because it makes Israel more secure. That is where Palestinians stand as they see their life being erased, as they see their country being erased. And that's not just in Gaza. That's also in the West Bank, where more than 70,000 Palestinians have been displaced just since January, where the Israeli government is openly, unashamedly telling Europe that in response to its announcement of conditional recognition of Palestine, they plan to annex 60% of the occupied West Bank, knowing there will be no consequences. Yeah. So the money, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, it goes down the drain. And Europe has been doing this for far too long not to get it. It's not enough to pay. You have to stop those robbing and destroying all the donor-funded projects. And then thank you very much. Keep your donor money, keep your taxpayer money for your own development, but set us free.
Daniel, what do we do with what we've just heard? And it is not, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, so basically this issue is not intractable. There are solutions. And many of us, I'm in my 40s, you grow up with the burden of Palestine and Israel looming so large over our existence that it's been there since I was born. But everybody here is talking about a way out, that there is a pathway out of this. What do you identify very sharply as the obstacles towards that? And more importantly, is there a realistic framework for rebuilding? What needs to happen and happen almost immediately, and who must do it?
I left the easy question to last already. Look, if I were to drill down on one word from all of that, I mean, it's come up, it's impunity. Do not expect Israel to behave any differently if every time it puts an extreme project out there, it undertakes an extreme action, it goes out, puts its finger in the air, oh wow, we can get away with it. The collective response is they escalated. They went to the dictionary and they found the next word up from condemn. As long as the lived Israeli experience is, this does not affect our equities as individuals living in this country, Israelis will either endorse leaderships that are pursuing genocidal policies, or their opposition to that will be exclusively framed around get the hostages out, which is what most of the protests are about. I don't want to ignore those less numerical who do get and do stand up and do hold pictures of Palestinian children being starved, who get this is a genocide. But for the majority of Israelis, their society can live with this because that is the experience that they have witnessed. So what I would say to you is, there is a dynamic, of course, between what goes on inside Israel and what they feel from the outside. And if we just go through and list those things, Redi. Inside Israel, I wish I could report to you that society is split down the middle in terms of its treatment of the Palestinians. I can't, because that would be untrue. I can tell you that society is split down the middle on other issues, on Netanyahu, on whether to prioritize or deprioritize getting the Israelis out. That, of course, also means that there's deep division on the question of a ceasefire. Israeli resilience should not be overestimated, by the way. The degree to which fragility has not been tested is important. You started this session, Redi, and I'm not saying this to try and smuggle in a few extra moments of speaking time, but you started this session in a way that perhaps coming from the Global South is so unusual when I speak on Palestine. You gave us that experience of South Africa. Would the white Afrikaner community have changed its ways if it did not get given the signal by the outside community, by those who it cared about, by those who it plays sports with, by those who it did business with? Hey guys, this isn't normal. So in the course of a genocide, Israeli society has not been given that signal. Israel doesn't have an endless supply of reservists. It has a strong economy, but it's an economy that is plugged in globally. So if you want to change that internal dynamic, I don't say the sanctions can bludgeon them into changing, but the sanctions can free up a different conversation inside Israel, which is this worth the cost? Mm-hmm. Does the incentive structure look different now for whether we continue this or not? Is everything we're seeing in Gaza, including the killing of the witnesses, whether they're journalists or international aid workers, everything Philippe described and lives with every day in terms of the reports he gets from the ground? And then you look at that outside picture and you go through it. I'm going to park this, I'm not going to go into it, but I think the Palestinians are very ill-served by the people who claim to be their leadership. Those people do not have credibility with their own public. They exist more as a useful tool of Israel and its allies. If you ask me, park that. Go through the list. Manal, I hope people listened to what Manal said. She said something really important and really interesting. And I'll interpret it in my own words, if I may. Manal said, we are not doing appeasement. Appeasement of this Israeli government has not gotten us anywhere. Some went down that path. I'm going beyond your talking points. Some went down that path, and we've seen, this is me now, what the Abraham Accords achieved and didn't achieve. The most horrendous assault on the Palestinians. I'm not suggesting causality, but I am suggesting it clearly didn't make things better. And how I interpret all of that is that the region looks not just at the radicalizing, destabilizing impact of what everyone in their society sees on their phones every day in terms of what's being done to the Palestinians, but also that broader hegemonic regional project that was referred to of Israel. They look at that and they say, how do we deal with this? And I think we're in the early stages of different actors in the region, in their own ways, looking at how they deal with that. Go down the list to the next place, very briefly. Europe. This is where Israel looks at its allies and says, are they going beyond rhetoric? And the resounding response is an absolute no. Europe is exactly, pretty much at least, where Israel wants it to be. Because if you keep paying, you're actually subsidizing the occupation. Much of that money is going to security cooperation. It's not funding Palestinian self-defense against Israel's crimes. It's helping to fund the Palestinian Authority conducting security operations against its own people quite often. And I would argue, you spoke about what one corner of southern Africa, and I'll come on to what that has done, but one small place in Central Europe, where we are now, Slovenia, I would go as far as to suggest that if Europe took the lead from a Slovenia and were going down the path that Slovenia is going down, things might look different. Ending arms exports, for instance, not just recognizing, not just talking. Europe is a crucial trading partner for Israel. Europe is where Israelis travel visa-free and feel like they are connected to the world. Europe is where Israel participates in international sports. Europe is where Israel holds approximately a quarter of its assets in European banks. If you tell me that going down that list and addressing those things and showing Israel that there's a consequence wouldn't budge this equation, even without America, then I'd say you're smoking something very strong. America's not there. I'll mention the other two. America's not there. There's interesting dynamics in America, including inside the MAGA world. Public opinion in America is shifting. The polls that just showed 60% of Americans, Quinnipiac poll, 60% oppose arms sales to Israel, 32% support them, 50% call this a genocide, 35% don't. But we're not there in America, I acknowledge that. And the global south, that corner of southern Africa, that case at the ICJ, the fact that South Africa co-chairs something called the Hague Group. So far, it's all countries in the global south committed to actually taking measures. All of those things can shift this dynamic and put politics back on the agenda. And by putting politics back on the agenda, first of all, end the genocide. But second of all, let's not go back. Let's not pretend that there was a pre-October 7 peace process or reality that we are all just yearning to be back in. I know that compared to genocide, apartheid feels like a warm and cozy place. It isn't. So the alternative cannot be a return to apartheid. If I may, one comment. I've spoken, I've said some things as a former practitioner and an analyst, but I also want to say something very personally as a Jewish person who genuinely is shuddering inside when I use the word genocide. Mm-hmm. I cannot believe that this is what is supposedly being done, or it's being done supposedly in our name, in our collective name. I believe there is nothing less Jewish, less learning from Jewish history than what the state of Israel is doing today. And anyone who tells you that acknowledging that, calling it out, calling for sanctions is anti-Semitic has an awful lot to learn from history.
I was going to come to you, Mr. Lazzarini. I'm coming to you in just a moment, but the EU has to respond to this. Apartheid South Africa was broken by sanctions. The sports boycott, as white South Africa felt isolated on the global stage, they realized that their destiny lay with part of a society, being part of a community, being a part of the world. It sounds as if the EU can do more. Not just this aid, not just putting money, but actually creating a framework for consequences for Israel immediately. Why are you not doing that as the EU?
Thank you. Well, I could say that, and it would be the easy answer, is that, you know, we are a democratic ensemble. We are 27 and 27 countries in which you have internal debates on this question. And there is an agreement on the fundamentals, on the DNA. We all want a two-state solution. That may be obvious, but for example, I haven't heard anything on the US side regarding a two-state solution. We are all against settlement. It's a long time I haven't heard anything on the US side against settlements. So just to flag this. Then there's this debate within EU about the virtue of pressure versus dialogue, which is the usual debate in diplomacy what is the best balance between dialogue and pressure to obtain what we would like. Beyond this, the question here is whether EU on its own could get what we all would like, that is obviously a ceasefire and a serious peace process towards a two-state solution. My perception, and having been working on that for a long time, it was even with the support of the United States, because we did have from time to time support of the United States, it was absolutely difficult, to say the least, to get that, even in the heat times of the peace process. So I think if you don't get a kind of coalition of players there, it's really kind of impossible mission. That doesn't mean that we have to do it. We have been very active to try to do it. Once again, this is the purpose of the work we are doing with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and with the Arab countries, that is the Global Alliance. This is exactly what it's about preserving the two-state solution and also making this two-state solution attractive. Here, we cannot put aside another main actor, which is the Israeli public opinion. And the Israeli public opinion, and here it may be different from South Africa, has an history. And their history is Shoah, and the other element of the history is the 7th of October. And the hostages, 20 I think are still alive, is a kind of permanent remembrance of this history. So if you're not able collectively, if we are not able collectively to address the Israeli public opinion, the universities, the researchers, the businessmen, the members of the Knesset about their needs, it's very difficult to move. There will be elections in Israel in 1 year, or maybe less, so it will be a definite moment to be in a position to dialogue with this civil society and pass our message. Because I think when we see the history of Israel, yes, the role of the US is not to be undermined, and it has been from time to time a key one. But it also comes from within Israel. What are the choices Israelis are facing? Yes, they are in majority in favor of a ceasefire, maybe mainly because they want to get the release of hostages, but who doesn't want the release of hostages? But we have to tell them also more and more about the situation of the Palestinians and about how the Palestinian state will be in their own interest. It will be for the security of the Israelis. This discourse is not heard by the Israeli society. It's not heard. It was heard in the past, and now they are completely overwhelmed by the 7th of October trauma. So how can we, overcome this and being able to be understood? Not only by, how many are there now in Israel that are really supporting a peace process, Daniel?
There was a vote in the Israeli Knesset on July 18th of last year in which 0 Zionist members of Knesset voted against a motion which said no to a Palestinian state. Yeah. So the dialogue and access is going really well.
So it's clear that the challenge is huge. I will not make a difference, if I may say, between the Zionist members of the Knesset and the other members of the Knesset, but those representing the Palestinian community in Israel do not self-define as Zionists, so it's just a factual distinction.
Okay, let's just pause here for a minute. I'm going to come back to the two-state solution. I'd like to get Saudi Arabia's thoughts on that. But let's just go back to UNRWA here. I must say, when I follow the reports, the press conferences, the images coming out of Gaza and spreading into other parts of Palestine, there is a sense that lines have been crossed multiple times. And what I am worried about as a practitioner, as a human being, is the process through which we normalize certain behavior, certain actions, politically, diplomatically, and at a humanitarian level. International human rights law, international humanitarian law, that there are actions by superpowers, if I may use that term, I think you all understand what I mean colloquially, that reinforce certain behavior so that we as humanity, we are in danger of forgetting what the law looks like in light of what is happening, the normalization of the subversion of law. I don't know if you follow what I'm saying.
Thank you. I do follow what you are saying. I think I have mentioned a few times that the risk for us is that Gaza becomes a graveyard of international humanitarian law. There is a feeling in the region that international law, international humanitarian law, human rights convention have lost its universality. It is implemented depending on the situation we want to deal with in a different manner. So what does it mean? Obviously, what we have seen in Gaza has blatantly crossed any red line, to the extent that it's making the Geneva Convention irrelevant. Two basic principles: proportionality. You justify killings of hundreds of people because you are looking after one person. Difficult to explain where the proportionality is. When you talk about distinction, when even internal report of the army indicates that more than 80% have been women and civilians, where is the distinction? Where basically the entire Gaza Strip has been whipped off and reduced in rubble, where is the proportionality or the distinction? So we have a long list, but let's do absolutely no mistake. There is no Gaza or Palestine exception. I know that in some country, even some human rights activists believe that IHL, International Humanitarian Law, or human rights needs to be applied, respected everywhere, but they accept the exception of Palestine. And of course, you find it in countries where you have the deepest guilt coming from World War II. But the risk here is that what we have in terms of multilateralism reconstructed from the ashes of World War II is today at risk to become again irrelevant. The rule-based order, the legacy of World War II, which is our rule-based order in which we all have been grown up and believe and fought for, is today at risk of becoming irrelevant. The problem is there is no alternative being put on the table. So what does it mean after that? And I go back to what I said before about the lack of compassion and the prevailing impunity. But if we are not capable, and I heard about the importance, and I hear this, to understand also the deep trauma which has been inflicted to the Israeli society in October 7. But if we are unable to express mutual empathy, the alternative is more of the same barbarism that we are witnessing. Is this the kind of value we want in the future, our children to grow up? Certainly not. And we might, or the generation to come, might be hunted the same way that generation in Europe have been hunted by what happened during World War II. We are repeating some of these cycles. Right. And this, I believe, is one of the main danger, and that's the reason why we cannot afford inaction. Okay. And the last point, because what Daniel said, I heard it already last week from a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, calling exactly for the same: help us from outside. Help us from outside the same way we have help from outside to bring an end to the apartheid system. These are messages I did not hear a year ago, but it emerged more and more. They try, the division is not because of the state of Palestine, but there are huge divide. Part of the society wants to put an end. They don't want the legacy of the atrocity. They say, do not do it on my name, yes. But they need our help, and we have to listen to them too.
Okay. Let's hear from Counsellor Manal Radwan. You know, talking of a two-state solution, from Saudi Arabia's point of view, is that still a viable, implementable even, not just from a desire and aspirational point of view? Are there some tools that can be deployed to make that happen?
I want to start by saying genocide never offered protection to anyone. Actually, quite the opposite. That needs to be extremely clear. Second, Israel has no veto over Palestinian rights. It does not have a veto over Palestinian rights to self-determination. Israel itself, when it applied for membership in the UN, did so under the condition of not undermining the rights of Palestinians. Please go back to the proceedings of the GA meetings and the commitments that Israel has committed itself to gain its admittance to the United Nations. This needs to be very clear. Now, do we believe in the two-state solution? Of course we believe in the two-state solution. More than that, the global alliance that have been talked about is about the implementation of the two-state solution. It is not about a process. It is not about starting to negotiate. It is not about dialogue. Nothing wrong with all of these things, but I will tell you something. You are not dialoguing over whether the Palestinians have rights or not. You are not negotiating over whether we can have a Palestinian state or not. Right. You are not putting out a peace process to think of, is a Palestinian state a possibility, and does it really meet the conditions of securing Israel or not? That's not what we are for. That's not what is consistent with international law and the rule-based order and what the United Nations stands for and what we have all committed ourselves to. We are in the process of taking concrete steps. Recognition is one step. Of course, it's not a token. It is a right. Overdue, but good that it is happening, and it is shaping the conversation, and it is actually giving concrete ways to help the Palestinians realize their state. It is not symbolic in any way, shape, or form. If you go into World Bank meetings or IMF meetings, or we talk about UNCTAD, or we talk about real legal aspects, these recognitions matter and are meaningful. And they also impress two important things, which are incredibly important. One, especially when it is happening from the heart of Europe, especially if we now welcome France, UK, Canada, and others, this is communicating to the Israelis the only path forward is with the Palestinian state. This is not optional, but this is a fact. And that's a message that is extremely important for them to hear from these countries. The second important message is that we have to communicate to the Palestinians, this is related to your earlier question, that their plight is heard. It is not enough. Of course it is not enough, but their plight is heard, and we have to work to double our efforts for them, to empower them to realize their state. This is extremely important. If we do not respond in legal ways, in political ways, in diplomatic ways to the plight of the Palestinians, and if we don't reward their persistence, we only give away to radicals on both sides. And that is the world that, unfortunately, we are heading to. And that's why this is practical. It is not about words and symbols. It is about impact, real impact on the ground. And so, long answer to your question, not only do we believe in a two-state solution, but we are working right now on the implementation of a two-state solution.
Okay. Daniel, you were unequivocal in talking about expectations of the European Union. You spoke about the Global South as well. And I think you did mention the Accords. I want to get just a brief comment on that. What is their role in all of this? Were they just about strategic convenience? Do they represent a genuine shift in Arab-Israeli relations, or simply just an alignment against Iran dressed as peace? What do they mean in this context? But also in the context of Donald Trump's transactional diplomacy. It's not just with the Middle East. In other areas as well, whether it's the DRC or the Sudan, there is that undeniable layer of a transactional and a predatory foreign policy approach. Your thoughts? Very quickly, we've got 10 minutes.
Which I would not limit to the Trump administration. I think there were elements of discontinuity, but also strong elements of continuity. And we're sitting on a panel with an eminent friend from Saudi Arabia. She will attest to the efforts made by the Biden administration in this respect. Thankfully, ultimately unsuccessful. Let's be clear. America gave Morocco recognition of Western Sahara. Something against international law, something not done in the past. There's a game apparently being played right now with Somaliland, where there are talks of America recognizing Somaliland in exchange for taking Palestinians forcibly removed from Gaza. So America is willing to deploy those things. I think for other actors it was different. These are also countries that had never raised a hand in anger at Israel or vice versa. So it's hard to define this as peace between two non-warring countries. Whatever the intentionality, the outcome is that if anyone thought that these relations could be deployed for the furtherance of peace, well, they haven't even been deployed for the avoidance of genocide. So that should tell us something. Because if you look at what's being done, you cannot understand what is the total destruction in Gaza, all the things we've watched and we know about. This isn't about defeating Hamas. One of the biggest lies of this conflict is if Hamas just gave back the hostages and just disarmed. Netanyahu has told us he has 5 conditions, including future governance, which no Palestinian or reasonable person would accept. So this isn't about defeating Hamas. This isn't even about defeating the two-state solution. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, that ship sailed long ago. This is about the physical removal and annihilation of the Palestinian people, a second Nakba. And if I may just echo one thing that Philippe said, maybe everything you've heard, maybe what Nour has told us about the Palestinian experience, maybe that doesn't move you. Maybe you don't give a damn about Palestinians. Maybe you don't give a damn about Israeli Jews either. As far as I'm concerned, this is a disaster for Israeli Jews. And the last thing I would want people to take away from this session is we swap one zero-sum intended outcome of removing Palestinians with another solution, which is removing Israeli Jews. Even if you don't care about those things, you should care about the new norms, the lesson, the takeaway of what can be gotten away with impunity in such a situation. This abomination, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, to replace the tried and tested work of Philippe's UNRWA agency and others. The way Palestinians are being kettled by the sea on the Egyptian border through the deployment of humanitarian aid to physically remove, disperse, displace, and punish. These violations of international law are something that should worry all of us, because that is coming to a neighborhood near you, and that's before we even go into how AI automated weaponry has been used in this war. We read about the Lavender system for targeting mass killings of Palestinians if there was any algorithm which suggested a militant might be in the area. We have to preserve and rebuild that international legal architecture. I would say, thankfully, geopolitics is not what it was. And as much as we should be in despair at the US is not the only relevant global actor. And It's not reflected enough on this stage and in many settings in the West, but we're in a different era, and I think that might be for the better.
No, I want to give you an opportunity to just share your thoughts here. From everything you've said and what everybody has said, even if the bombs were to stop falling today, we can't go back to what Palestine, what Gaza was before.
No, you can't. I was listening to the EU representative talking about the trauma that Israelis live. Well, let me tell you that this is our own Shoah, and this is a transformational episode in our very long history. We will never be the same, and neither should you. And nobody who's been witnessing this genocide for 2 years can be the same after knowing and seeing what has been done. So it's not just the buildings that have gone. It's not just the memories that have been erased. It's not just the entire bloodlines that have been eliminated in Gaza. We are not the same. And so, as Daniel said, it wasn't a rosy peace process on the 6th of October, and please don't take us back to that. It's not workable anyways, okay? The premise of the so-called peace process, and the reason why it was dysfunctional for so long, is because it was based on the idea that Palestinians must prove to Israel they're worthy. It is a racist notion, and it won't work. Because Palestinians don't need to prove to Israelis anything. We don't owe our occupiers, our colonizers, anything. They owe us decolonization. The International Court of Justice agrees. In July of last year, it declared that this is an illegal occupation. Countries have obligations. They must meet them. And if Europe can't agree collectively, it can act individually. We've heard from the Slovenian president yesterday, but possibly joining the case of South Africa. We heard from Belgium this morning about taking very serious action, sanctions against settlement products, against individuals, against dual nationals, against companies, reviewing their investment policies, and so on. So there are no excuses, really. And if we were to wait for the Israeli public opinion to shift in this context of impunity that we've been talking about, then there will be a Palestine no more. We cannot wait for that. This is a moment of existential threat for the Palestinian people. We're the ones being erased at this point. And you know, the two-state solution, the phrase, has become a very dirty word in the Middle East. So I don't like to use it, and I won't use it. But I will tell you this. Palestinians know that this is a land dear to everybody who lives in it. Nobody is going anywhere, okay? But the idea is not to put Palestinians on probation. We were ready when the world took an unprecedented step to take our land, carve it, and make two countries out of it in 1947. And we were denied that since then. So this is not about a process, as Manal so eloquently said. This is about telling Israel that there is one way for it to be an accepted, normalized state at the world stage, but also in the region, which is to act in conformity with international law, to stop committing genocide, and to stop colonizing another people. It really is quite simple. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need convincing.
All right, we have run out of time. We've got about a minute, and I think that it is proper to go back to UNRWA for closing comment. I'll tell you why. Because it's the humanitarian workers who are on the ground. It's them to whom we will wake up tomorrow to hear what is happening. What does the data say? What is the everyday experience? It's them who have ideas about what needs to happen to get Palestinians and residents of Gaza through to the next day. So final thoughts from you, from tension to triumph. What would that look like?
people in Gaza are so exhausted that they hardly can think about the next hour. So, you know, when we talk about a day after how to implement a two-state solution, rebuilding Gaza, these are just words. It's completely abstract. The only thing people in Gaza want today is to have a respite, is to feel safe, is to be able to feed the children. But once this is achieved, you know, and I agree with you, no one wants to go back to the statuto or ex ante. No one. But somehow, Gazans just are nostalgic of a life they had before. They had, like any of us, you know, families, dreams, invested in their education. It was tough life, no doubt. I've seen Gaza evolving over the last 30 years. It ended up with a large prison. There was no process before, let's be clear. Yes. When we talk about the peace process, there was no peace process for at least 10 years. Why? Because we thought we can have a containment policy. We know how to deal with containment, so our priorities are elsewhere. That's what happened before. But for a person in Gaza today, what they want is an end to this hell. I mean, it's hell in all its shapes today. They just want the end of the military operation, they want a ceasefire, they want the gates to open in Gaza, and then, you know, we have a generation, a sacrificed generation of children. 1 million children, among them 650,000 of the age of primary, secondary school. Deep trauma, live in the rubble. This is not, that's not the way to promote future peace and security. Right. The resentment is such that if we do not pay attention and do not make it a top priority to bring back, to invest in these children, we will have insecurity for the decades to come.
In conclusion, and what I take away from this panel are the words of Desmond Tutu at the dawn of South Africa's democracy, saying that white South Africans had to understand that their well-being rested in guaranteeing our well-being. And that was the message in South Africa at that time. I'd like to see that in the Middle East. I also, as a human being, a citizen of the world, from what you are all saying, I am jealous, I am worried about international human rights law, because that's what we stand to lose. And you stand to lose the public, you stand to cement cynicism. People are not going to respect multilateral institutions, institutions that have been built to safeguard them if Palestinians' rights are not guaranteed. So with that, I want to thank you all for bringing your heart, your expertise, your robust and honest and candid accounts of what you see. And may we gather here next year under a different Palestine, a different world, a world that recognizes that we are linked to each other and we have to fight for our humanity, for our decency, for democracy to thrive. Thank you so much, all of you.